Firefighters worked into the night to bring the blaze under control, but not before it had consumed a 4-square-block area of an aging industrial complex, causing millions of dollars in damage. The fire started in mid-afternoon inside a complex of warehouses, chemical and manufacturing companies. Thick black smoke spewed hot embers hundreds of feet into the sky, and the intense heat ignited one building after another. Hundreds of residents were forced to flee their homes with what they could carry. Cars exploded and burned while containers of stored chemicals thundered amidst the flames. Pasaic, New Jersey Fire Chief Kenneth Patterson described the blaze as one of the worst in the city's history. Within 2 hours, it had engulfed homes, apartment buildings, and other structures in a 4-block area.
My wife did want to get out of here. You know, she was looking for a place, and I got 3 sons with her, you know. Now look at it. They ain't got nothing left. Everything's gone. Everything's gone.
One firefighter, a 65-year-old volunteer, died of a heart attack he suffered while helping to battle the blaze. Fire units from more than 20 surrounding communities joined forces with the Pasaic Department, but efforts to bring the conflagration under control were hampered by a lack of water pressure. A large warehouse used by a wallpaper manufacturer appeared to be safe at first, but when the heat...
Devil's Night 1985, the arsonists go on their annual rampage.
But there are fewer devils out there tonight. I'm Kelly Kerrigan, a live report from Sky 2 coming up.
Also in the news at 11 o'clock, some of these foods contain a chemical that could kill you. We'll have a special report.
And who put the bomb aboard that jetliner to Dallas?
Eyewitness News, the 11 o'clock report is next.
Go for the lean. Arby's lean beef and cheddar or bacon cheddar deluxe. Lean! Be lean! Arby's tender, juicy lean roast beef with tangy cheddar cheese. Or with cheese, lettuce, tomato, and bacon. 2 delicious ways to...
Chuck Gatica and Sports with Fred McLeod. The Eyewitness News team at 11.
The fires of Devil's Night 1985, despite a citywide effort to protect Detroit from arsonists. But as of this hour, the fires don't seem to be as bad as the 2 previous years.
And there's a massive offensive to put the lid on the arson now that a city curfew on teenagers has taken effect. We have a team of Eyewitness News reporters covering the events tonight. Let's go first live to Kelly Kerrigan, who's been watching from the air since the first fires broke out at dusk. Kelly?
George, Kathy, the fires are burning below us. We by no means have a perfect report card for tonight. There have been well over 100 fires. But I'm as pleased to report as I'm sure you are to hear, this has not been a devil's night of the past. The urge to burn began as the sun dipped below a sky as fiery as Detroit was predicted to become. But if the arsonists were ready, so was the city. On this night, every single public vehicle in town, including garbage trucks, were on the prowl, emergency lights flashing. Foot patrols attempted to cover the nooks and crannies where the hooligans hide to do their dirty work. But flame is faster than man, and early in the evening, the wicked waste was underway. This fire started in an abandoned 2-story apartment house at Vinewood in Milford, but wind and time persuaded it to spread to a second occupied building. That is the real crime of the night, when residents like Nellie Davis can only hope that the devil spares them.
Makes me feel terrible to think that I have to live in a neighborhood that kids would do anything like this.
From the air, Detroit was beginning to look like a giant campground with dozens of fires burning at once. A few stuck out like sore thumbs. At Tyreman and Scotton, just west of the Jeffries, first a garage fire, then painfully apparent that the insistent lick of flames would push the terror to the occupied homes themselves.
I understand they came here expecting a spectacle. The various networks and newspapers expecting to see city burning and me playing my violin, I guess. But they were disappointed.
There have been 177 fires so far. That's down 30%, the mayor says, plus 8 arrests for arson. But it is still a long, long way until the welcome relief of dawn. This is Kelly Kerrigan reporting live for Eyewitness News Late Edition from Sky 2.
Kelly, you've been watching these fires since dusk tonight. Does the rate of the setting of the fire seem to be dying down now?
At this point, it actually seems to be picking up just a bit. It was very sparse to begin with. There was one one over here, one over there. There seem to be a lot near the Fisher Building, near Highland Park, near Hamtramck. But at this point, we're seeing more and bigger fires, so we're hoping that 177 isn't too far off later on.
Well, that would mean that the curfew apparently is not working yet anyway. Kelly, you have said that you don't feel that this year is as bad as last. Let's call in Steve Still now, who is on the ground in southwest Detroit. And Steve, see if you concur. Is this not as bad as last year, because you've been watching this the last 3 years?
I think that we used to see more fires. There were not as many fires tonight, at least that it seemed that way to me, but it depended on where you lived. For example, I'm in southwest Detroit. Last year they didn't have many problems at all. I'm at what is normally an engine company. It is a command center, one of the mayor's command centers where they're dispatching fire trucks by telephone. Here they had more arson fires in this area than they normally have on Devil's Night. This is a tough time for everybody, not just firefighters, but families, too, are trying to live on a day-to-day basis. And part of the problem for families is that vandals started their work even before the sun went down.
Thank you for your help, sir.
Devil's Night for Cassandra Verge started before the sun went down. It was just a dumpster fire, but there were not enough firefighters to go around, so police officers had to put it out. But they even had to borrow a hose to do it. Devil's Night tends to keep everybody on edge, and Cassandra was no exception. After all, she lives across the alley from an abandoned house. She was afraid extra police protection wouldn't be enough.
There's a lot of police out there walking the beat, but can't watch everything.
So you've got to keep an eye on your own house.
Right.
Through a tense night, little 3-year-old Tania played on the floor, and her mom carried on with life as normally as possible. And lending a hand was family friend Red Jones, who's seen it all before.
Young people, they love doing devil's things, you know. The devil really get into them. That's the devil for you.
And that is the devil for you, he says. They were lucky tonight. They didn't have very many problems in the part of town they lived in. As we mentioned before, right here in southwest Detroit, you see a fire truck leaving right now from one of these command centers. They are keeping busy tonight, but it appears not quite as busy as they were last year. George?
Okay, thanks very much, Steve. Still reporting from the southwest side of Detroit. Let's review for you real quickly. 177 fires reported as of about an hour ago. Obviously, that number is going up. And perhaps the most eerie news we've had for you is Kelly Kerrigan reporting live from the helicopter just a few minutes ago that the rate of the setting of fires seems to be going up at this hour. So it could be a long night.
While the city of Detroit braces for a long night, so too are members of the media from places outside of the metro area. Ken Montoya reports if pictures paint 1,000 words, they've got a volume on Detroit.
Devil's Night is a tradition Detroit could do without. In other cities, it's a night for small-time pranks. Here, it's an arson rampage.
There is more to this than vandals and fire. There is a battle going on, a battle over the image of the city of Detroit.
It's tough to convince people Detroit is a city in the middle of a renaissance when all they ever see is a city in the middle of flames. Mayor Coleman Young took an unusual approach to the problem. First, he mobilized the city as best he could, and second, he suggested suppression of the news in the days leading up to Devil's Night, basically saying, don't give anybody any ideas and don't hurt the city's image.
There's been widespread publication of Devil's Night, and it started with the publication right here. And I have been desperately seeking the cooperation of you to play it down, because we do not want to become a national sensation.
It's too late to keep Detroit's Devil's Night a secret. CBS News is in town to get the story, so is a crew from Cleveland.
Nowhere is there such a passion for arson as there is, I think, in Detroit.
And Detroit will get worldwide attention. Tomorrow morning, when people in Japan are having breakfast, they'll get a live report from Detroit, and they'll see the flames of Devil's Night. Ken Montoya, Channel 2 Eyewitness.
It's become a grim tradition in Motown for arsonists to set fire to buildings on the night before All Hallows Eve. Detroit firefighters.
Last night was a perfect example. And if you wonder why insurance companies charge people with businesses and homes more money to insure their businesses and homes, that's why. Because things burn down, things get done. And that's why people don't want to invest down there. That's why they don't want to live down there. That's why the insurance companies charge more for insuring things in Detroit. Pretty good reasons. All of them spelled out last night for everybody to see.
Day horror in Detroit. Arsonists took over from the hobgoblins last night. Devil's Night in Detroit was once a time for harmless pranks. People can't explain why, but about 3 years ago it changed and the setting of fires began. And ever since then, the fires have become more dangerous.
What was once just a night of pranks in Detroit has turned into an annual night of arson and destruction.
There have been so many emergency calls that, as an example, this fire has been burning for 20 minutes and still no fire department.
Coverage of the arson spree wasn't limited to the 3 American networks. Even viewers in Japan got to see the fires and hear just how bad the destruction was.
I flew over the city at 11 o'clock or so, and within only 30 minutes, we found out more than 6 fires from the air. I really didn't realize such bad numbers of the arson.
New Detroit President Walter Douglas said the situation is unfortunate for Detroit, but he said reporters are a part of the problem.
Let's just allow the Devil's Night to occur and not report on it. I mean, there were reporters all over the street last night riding with the fire engines and in my judgment, escalating this whole activity. I don't think that's news. I think that's hype.
Can we ignore this?
I'm not suggesting that. But I'm saying that it's almost a scenario that we each play a role in. Folks set fires, fire engines chase the fires, and the media report on the fires. Maybe we ought to think about doing something differently than that.
And while the videotape of burning buildings against the night sky played big on the morning news programs, most of the country's biggest newspapers did not devote much ink to Detroit's troubles. Newspapers in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco chose not to feature coverage of Devil's Night in today's edition. And in the suburbs, the Devil's Night story was almost completely different. Most communities reported no trouble of any kind. Half a dozen others had citizen complaints of eggs being thrown at cars or kids soaping windows. The worst problems were in Romulus and River Rouge, which together reported 3 house fires and about a dozen minor fires in trash dumpsters and fields.
After Devil's Night, and that means it is time to clean up after last night's arson attacks. In some cases, fires that were set in vacant buildings spread. In one West Side neighborhood, residents of an apartment building spent today claiming what was left of their charred possessions. That building burned last night after an abandoned apartment building next door had been set on fire. Authorities say more than 200 fires were reported citywide through midnight. That is more than 4 times the normal number, but it was down from the nearly 300 fires reporting during Devil's Night last year.
Mayor Coleman Young led more than 3,000 police officers, firefighters, and citizen volunteers in the effort to control Devil's Night destruction. This morning, he looked at the numbers of reported fires and declared the prevention efforts a success.
I'm more and more convinced as I look at the figures that we might wind up having cut the incidence of fire over the 3-day period in half, as opposed to what looks like now a 30 to 35% reduction.
Street patrols, civilian volunteer efforts, and the strict enforcement of the city's teen curfew will be in effect again tonight to make sure the city is quiet and safe on this Halloween 1985.
Devil's Night is over, but Mayor Coleman Young is reminding teenagers a citywide 10 o'clock curfew is in effect tonight as well. Mayor Young praised the comprehensive effort to squelch arson fires on Devil's Night, but today a bitter reminder for some fire victims that the effort wasn't good enough. Woody Willis has the first of 2 reports.
The level of mobilization increased dramatically over last year. More than any other single factor, it is attributed with preventing a recurrence of Devil's Night 1984.
I'm more and more convinced as I look at the figures that we might wind up having cut the incidence of fire over the 3-day period in half.
There is evidence the city isn't just dealing with misguided kids playing with matches.
Our first arrest last night for arson was an 11-year-old child lighting a dumpster. Our second arrest was a man who went across the alley and burnt the other house he owned.
Oddly enough, success the city had in tearing down more than 150 houses in the area hardest hit last year may have denied potential arsonists enough targets, so that the action was generally more widely dispersed and shifted to abandoned cars. Manpower was relocated quicker because of improved communications.
I don't have all the final figures yet, but I think we had about a 30% decrease
Pleased with it?
Very pleased with it.
The folks in one near East Side neighborhood noticed the difference. If you had to compare it with last year, what would you say?
Ooh, 100% difference.
Goblins didn't wait for nightfall to torch this vacant house. It was the second time the man next door has had to make a distress call.
Just hope they just tear it on now. But there's no shape to be remodeled or fixed up again.
Mr. Randall gave thanks for small favors. He's glad it didn't happen last night. Things were so busy, he says, firefighters wouldn't have been able to respond as quickly. On the east side, Woody Willis, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.
This is Ken Montoya. Here in this southwest Detroit neighborhood, flames lit the Devil's Night sky all night long. 4 times the fire was put out. 4 times it flared up again. It finally went out for good around sunrise. Looking at the fire scene in the daylight didn't make it look any better.
Some city officials are claiming victory because there was such a great reduction in the number of fires. But to those people unfortunate enough to be directly involved in the fires, there was no reduction, and the victory doesn't matter.
Leonard Cunningham is one of those people. Today, he can only go through his house and see what survived.
Oh, it's destroyed. Oh, my God.
Cunningham fought the fire through the night, and he lost.
I'm afraid I don't have any insurance at the end of our house. Some of our belongings are salvageable, but and I'm not working. I haven't worked for 3 years. So I guess when you're down, sometimes they kick you just one more time.
It took a half hour for firemen to get to the house, but Cunningham isn't mad. He says the firemen did a good job under the circumstances. A couple blocks away, another Devil's Night victim can even find the hidden blessings.
Danielle was spared, and I was spared, and then everybody in this apartment building, nobody got hurt. And thank God that we can all get help, because God's going to make a way.
There is not much bitterness among the fire victims, maybe because there's no time for that. Too much work to be done. Ken Montoya, Channel 2 Eyewitness News.
Oh, my.
One of the victims we talk with says the real key to solving Devil's Night fires is to get tough with our children.
Well, we've heard the figures from City Hall that the number of fires this year are down from a year ago. Our reporters who covered the Devil's Night fires last night agree that things seem to be better. But who's to know for sure? The city changed its communications and radio systems last night, which made getting information more difficult. In this evening's Perspective on Detroit, our Joe Weaver asks if the mayor and police and fire tried to suppress information deliberately.
Despite Mayor Young's efforts to keep the lid on trouble last night and his Iron Curtain methods to confuse the media, Detroit's burning image was spread all over the world today. There was no stopping network television crews from Europe, Japan, and this country from showing what it was really like last night. The mayor was proclaiming his task force had achieved its goals of reducing the number of fires from the year before. Well, that sounds rather suspicious when all of the records were lost in a so-called computer breakdown the day before. Nobody was keeping score except the mayor. Part of the task force plan, probably the major part, was to keep reporters and camera crews from knowing if there was any action or where it was. The whole fire response system was changed, along with normal communications channels. The task force said this was to keep gawkers and fire chasers away. But it looks like a government cover-up. One which not only failed, but put fire equipment miles away from burning homes and reduced response capability to a disastrous level. Any city government, including Mayor Young, has no right to stifle the flow of information, no matter how bad it makes them or the city look. Could the cover-up be related to next Tuesday's mayoral election? Well, it sure looks like that to me. I'm Joe Weaver, and that's my perspective.
Devil's Night is just one example of a growing problem in our communities. Teenagers in trouble with the law.
Night to be careful. Good evening. You can have fun on Halloween night, but the signs of the times tell us to be careful, watchful, and ready for danger. There was danger on some streets tonight. Investigators believe arson was behind a house fire along Schaefer on Detroit's northwest side. No injuries were reported at that blaze. And a fire in an abandoned house at Lawton and McGraw on the near west side was believed intentionally set. Authorities tell News 4 reports of fires are down 40% from last year, at least so far.
7 hours after flames erupted at the Gratiot Avenue facility. The 5-alarm fire consumed the stockhouse and blackened the skies over Detroit. Eyewitness News was the first on the scene of that massive fire, which seemed to mushroom right before our very eyes. And despite its intensity and the danger it posed, no one was injured.
And reporter Tiwa Chang, who managed to stay upwind of the fire since it began, brings us the latest in this live report. Tiwa?
George, you're looking at a live picture of the burned-out remains of one of the buildings in the abandoned Sroch Brewery complex. It's called the Stock House, and it was a storage facility where the beer vats were stored. At 11:10 this morning, the fire started somewhere on the 5th or 6th floor of the Stock House. According to a former Stroh's worker, the area had steel and also wooden beer vats.
They had all the fermenting tanks up there for the beer. They're pulling them out currently. They also had the R&D lab in there and some of the quality assurance lab. Knowing that I've been up in all those rooms and everything and doing work up there, and it's just weird to see it burning.
The fire went to 5 alarms, the highest rating, though one fireman said it was really the equivalent of 6 alarms. Fire may have been started by a wrecking crew worker. The Stroh's Brewery is scheduled to be demolished in a couple of weeks. A worker may have started the fire by accidentally cutting an oil line with an acetylene torch. This is not yet confirmed. For 4 hours, the fire stubbornly resisted efforts to put it out. The demolition crews had apparently cut nearly all the support beams on the floors, making it dangerous for firemen to go in and fight it. It continued to burn until the roof collapsed and water could finally be poured on the heart of the fire.
The third building is completely cut. All the metal and all the brick on the roof, we couldn't dare put anybody in there. Yeah. They're ready to dynamite that.
Because the buildings were being demolished, it was empty and no one was injured. Now, the firemen got the fire under control about 4 o'clock. As you can see, though, it's still smoldering. They say it will probably continue to smolder for several days after this. In the meantime, firemen will be here trying to keep it under control. Now, this particular wrecking company is the company that apparently was here taking the building down. Now, sir, do you know anything about exactly who was involved with that acetylene torch?
No, I have no idea. People seem to actually enjoy the spectacle of the fire at Stroh's Brewery.
From the beginning, the fire took on dramatic dimensions. Police blocked off several blocks of Gratiot. Falling debris forced police to keep crowds at a safe distance. The vantage from the Eastern Market drew many people who could watch the fire safely. An aspiring photographer liked the angle.
I like the sign and the helicopters going over in the fire. I was out here last week, and I have this all intact, so maybe we're going to put it together and see what I come up with, you know. I took a few pictures of the crowd, and everybody's on the edge of their seats.
The billowing smoke drew more people.
Well, I looked out the window, and I thought something important like the Eastern Market was burning, so I came down to watch this. I hope they're sending Peter Stroh the bill on this. He's done so much for the city. Now he's going off in a blaze of glory.
Traffic slowed down on I-75 South as drivers checked out the fire. For kids, it was visual history.
What do you think of this?
It's a real bad fire. And it was a very old building, too.
Kind of enjoy watching it, though?
Yeah.
Downtown had a smoky horizon this afternoon, and a Detroit landmark, soon to be gone, took on an entirely...
A major apartment house fire in Detroit tonight. Good evening. It's an apartment dweller's nightmare. Fire, the kind of fire which spreads fast and makes you and all the other tenants in your building run for your lives. That's exactly what happened on Detroit's east side tonight, and it cost one man his life. News 4's Ned McGrath is standing by live at the scene with the story of what's happened out there within the past few hours. Ned?
From what this all started about 9 o'clock this evening at the corner of 7 Mile and Outer Drive. We are told that the man who died is middle-aged, he is handicapped, and he was confined to a wheelchair. The fire apparently started in his apartment and then spread, forcing the evacuation of 20 to 30 other apartments. Many people have already returned inside the building, but many others were burned out of house and home.
It's a mess in there.
What happened in your apartment?
Nothing. Everything we had, except for the closet. Everything else is gone. Just the closet is left. Everything else. All the furniture, everything.
How many folks living in the apartment?
4.
Everybody get out okay?
Yeah. I was getting ready to go to bed, really. And someone knocked on the door and said I better hurry up and get out because the building was on fire.
So I ran out, got my baby and ran.
Got all your belongings out on the street now. Is your place pretty badly smoked or what?
Well, the ceiling's down in there. The roof fell in on it.
One of the first firefighters on the scene was Chief William Magis.
We had a fire here with approximately 20 or 30 apartments involved. Heavy damage on the fourth floor and heavy damage to the roof.
As is routine in these cases, an arson investigation is already underway, and we should mention some serious questions are being raised tonight about smoke detectors and fire alarms in that apartment building. Many of the residents with whom we spoke to this evening said there are none. And so that is something that the fire department investigators, of course, will be checking on tonight and in the days to come.
Thank you, Ned. We worry about crime and terrorism. Sometimes we forget what a vicious enemy fire can be. Thank you.
Tonight, the blaze broke out from a blowtorch being used to help dismantle the abandoned facility. Smoke could be seen in western Wayne County. More than 30 pieces of firefighting equipment were called in. Gratiot Avenue along the Brewery is still closed at this hour. There is concern the walls could give way. Units are still spraying water on smoldering parts of the structure. It could keep burning for days.
We just have to wait till it more or less burns itself out, or the top of that roof falls down.
Finally, the roof collapsed, and firemen could get to the heart of the fire and pour water on it. Even after the fire was under control and most of the firemen had already gone home, what was left of the stockhouse of the Stroh Brewery complex was still smoldering. It's expected to do so for several more days. T.Y. Chang, Channel 2.
For at least 2 days, the fire has already been going for almost 12 hours. It was started by a demolition worker with a cutting torch. Firemen at first decided to allow the fire to burn itself out, but later they agreed that might be too dangerous. The fire quickly spread to the upper floors of the stockhouse, where huge vats were stored. Firefighters were extra careful because the building's structural supports were weak, and they feared the walls might collapse. One fireman was hit in the eye with an object. He was treated at the scene. The plant is now owned by a demolition firm.
$69. American Airlines Fall Super Savers. Call today because space is going fast.
We're American Airlines, something special in the air.
Come on, 10,000.
Yes, 10,000. Now, give us a letter, Bruiser.
Give me an L.
Yes, there are 2 L's. Now, can you solve the puzzle?
I can't figure it out.
I'm sorry, we're out of time. But you're not.
Right, JJ. Know the missing letter and listen to 98.7 this Thursday morning at 7:10. You can win $10,000. Play Wheels of Fortune on 98.7 WLLZ.
She's stripped nude in a beauty pageant Thursday on Superior Court.
Eyewitness News with Bruce Kirk, Kathy Adams, Chuck Gaedica, Fred McLeod, Joe Weaver's Perspective, and the Eyewitness News team.
Good evening, everybody. If tonight is a taste of how Detroit is going to handle Devil's Night, we may not have as many problems. May not. A pretty normal night tonight, a number of fires and a number of arrests. Most of those arrested, though, fell into the curfew violations, a curfew the mayor has set for teens for the next 3 nights. Marjo Bell has spent his night on the streets of Detroit.
And Joe is with us live right now from police headquarters with the latest on the curfew and other activity in the city, including an industrial fire. Joe, what's the latest?
Well, Kathy, down here at police headquarters, it's been rather busy tonight with an unusual crew of much younger prisoners coming and going. But on the whole, it didn't seem like it was all that bad on the streets of Detroit tonight. Fire activity seemed to be about average, and police activity was about average as well, except for the arrest of several kids. Now, I mentioned fire activity, and that's because of the problem of arson surrounding Devil's Nights of the past. For that reason, fire officials were braced for the worst, and they expected some trouble tonight. They got a little bit of trouble earlier in the afternoon on Detroit's northeast side.
This is every day is double night, is it here? Every day, like double night, is it?
That's the way one homeowner felt after arsonists apparently torched the house next door. It was the second time in 6 weeks firebugs struck this stretch of Adeline Street, and firefighters braced for the worst. They got plenty of calls for dumpster fires, but the first serious blaze of the night was this 4-alarm warehouse fire in Midtown.
It's not empty. There's wooden doors stored up there in the second and third floor. It's loaded with closet doors and etc.
Unfortunate stuff.
What is this curfew on?
and police kept busy enforcing it.
Hey, let's go here. You go to your left. Hey, go to your left.
But they had to make some special arrangements for the influx of sheepish parents.
Well, you think he just got caught after hours or what?
I really don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I'm ready to find out myself what's going on.
Now, what parents did find out is that children had violated a city ordinance that could give them 90 days in jail or a $500 fine. But for the most part, the kids were first-time offenders and were allowed to go home with their parents. Now, I spoke just a moment ago to the mayor's press secretary, who tells me that as of 10 o'clock tonight, 206 Detroit youngsters were hauled in under the curfew violation ordinance, and he expects many more before the night's over. But at this point, it doesn't seem like we have any real crisis on our hands. Bruce and Kathy, let's go back to you.
Joe, a quick question. Of the 206 kids that were arrested, the teenagers, any sense of whether most of those kids knew about the curfew or had no idea?
It seemed to me, Bruce, that most of them really didn't care. Even if they had heard of it, they figured it was something that really wouldn't be enforced all that well. But from what we've seen here at police headquarters tonight, it was enforced rather well.
Yeah, taking it seriously. We'll see what happens tomorrow night. That's the big one, isn't it?
Our Joe Bell reporting live from the streets of Detroit.